Attention, armchair quarterbacks and shower thought GMs. It's time for this week's episode of SportsBall with Mike Maharrey and Alan Mosley. I was playing hockey earlier today.
Yeah?
I was sweating like a whore in church.
At least she's going to church. What about people that aren't going at all?
I guess they're sweating in their car.
It's true. Guys, welcome back for another episode of SportsBall. I am your host, Alan Mosley, joined as always by my co-host and Tampa Bay sports superfan. It's Mike Maharrey. Mike!
Oh, hello!
How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm okay.
It's weird doing SportsBall on a Tuesday.
It is weird doing SportsBall on a Tuesday, but apparently it works because there's people actually watching.
Those poor souls.
So we're going to take a quick look in chat to say, hello, Andrew Avery, howdy, friends and neighbor. Eric Eli says, go Gators, so of course he's banned.
Ooh, I like him.
No.
Oh!
Oh!
Yes!
And Darren Neal says, sup. Hey.
Sup, hey.
Yeah. Hello.
And I know Andrew Avery's pulling for the Boston Bruins in the NHL playoffs, and he's probably happy. His boys have a 1-0 lead on my beloved Lightning.
I have that screenshot of your prediction saved. I'm going to break it out, just depending on which way the winds blow.
You want to here's some brutal sports scheduling for you. So they have tonight's game 2 at 7:00. Tomorrow night is game 3 at 8:00. Then they have a day off. Then they play game 4, and then a day off, game 5, and then if there's a 6 and 7, those are also back to back. So 2 back to backs in a hockey playoff season. It's pretty intense.
Who does that benefit?
I think that it benefits the Lightning slightly in the goaltending department, which is oftentimes where you have a little bit of stress on the back-to-backs. The Bruins are playing Halleck, and he's like 35 years old, so he's an old dude. So he might struggle a little bit with the back-to-backs, but I don't think it'll really have that much. I mean, they both have to do it, right? So
I like that I turned 35 in a month, and you're sitting here talking about old dudes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Doesn't it feel like we just did an NCAA preview? Like
No.
It does to me. I feel like we've only done 2 seasons of SportsBall, but this is our third season preview.
Is it really?
I think it is.
No, I did not realize that, but I guess it is.
Because in past years we took an off-season break, which this year, the whole year has been one giant off-season.
Right.
But we normally take an off-season in the middle of the summer, and then football comes back in August, and we start the show again. So we started the show like a few weeks ago because we were tired of being on permanent hiatus. And granted, since other sports got delayed, we're still talking about those sports when otherwise they would normally be
It's so
finished.
weird because so the baseball season that started last week is halfway over.
Yeah, right. I'm fine with that because I'll be honest, I'm okay with postseason baseball. Like October's pretty fun for baseball,
right.
And so I feel like they just did everyone a favor by just skipping straight to the end.
Well, there you go.
There you go. But so the point I'm trying to make is that because of this kind of awkward year, this is when we would normally start season 3 of SportsBall.
True.
So this is kind of so we're technically starting our 3rd year, I guess, of doing the show, even though it's really on like a year and a half worth of episodes. It's the 3rd year of the show.
It's the 3rd year of bread and circuses.
Yeah, that's right.
SportsBall.
With that said, it's time for our NCAA football season preview, which 2 weeks ago we didn't know we were going to be doing an NC football season preview.
And I'm still not altogether certain there'll actually be a football game. Although I heard somebody say that I think there's a football game like tonight in one of the Division 2 or something. So there actually is football starting.
Wait for my final thought. We're going to get there.
Ooh.
Just wait for my final thought.
Okay.
So it is time for the 2021 NCAA football season preview 3/5 edition. It's the 3/5 edition because, if anything, this might be the shortest season preview episode we've ever done because we
Sounds
only have
racist.
a little. What can you do? We all discriminate, Mike Maharrey. I discriminate against Gators.
So rude.
Yeah, well, you know what the terrible thing about Boise State's colors is that they're the same colors as Florida.
But they're not really, because it's a different shade of blue.
Is it?
Yeah.
This is a different shade of blue?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, whatever.
Or different shade of orange. It's definitely different.
So as everyone probably has heard by now, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 will not be playing fall football. And despite the arguing and the debating and the protesting from players and fans and parents alike, those conferences have doubled down and dug in their heels and said, no, we're not rethinking the. So that means we're literally on the cusp of the new season. They will not be a part of it. So for today, now, you know me. I'm a lover of the mid-major. I like the little guy. I always think that they should have a seat at the table. My Boise State Broncos won't be playing either. Mountain West said no thanks. Mountain West and MAC to go along with Big Ten and Pac-12.
Now, so, the American Athletic Conference, we're playing some football.
Yeah, that is true.
In fact, Jeff Scott, the new coach of the USF Bulls, has been saying that they're now part of the Power Four. So.
Yeah, they can just keep right on saying that too.
Well, hey, UCF national champions. It's on the license plate, dude.
Weren't they the ones that were doing the hashtag Power 6 like ad campaign?
I think they were. Yeah,
I think it seems like so they've moved up from 6 to 4.
Yeah,
their conference is moving up in the AP rankings. How about that? So, speaking of the AP rankings, we're going to start off the show by looking at the AP preseason top 25.
Okay. So I haven't seen this yet.
You haven't seen this yet. So right off the bat, you might notice some strange rankings in there. Especially at the 2 and the 7 and the 9 and the 12 and the 16 and the 17 and the 19. Yeah, that's at the 22.
So after the first game, does Ohio State drop out of the rankings?
So for people who are only listening and not watching the video program, the AP preseason top 25, really quickly, starting, of course, number 1 was Clemson. We'll just go through quickly the top 10. Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, LSU, Penn State, Florida, Oregon, Notre Dame. You might be asking yourself, wait a minute. Half of those teams said they're not playing football.
Exactly.
The Associated Press, in their infinite wisdom, decided, I don't know if this is some sort of protest rank or what it is, but they or traditions or teams being able to say they have a consecutive streak of starting a season ranked or what. I don't know what the reason is, but they decided for the preseason basically week 0 that they would rank teams whose seasons are canceled. But they have said that after week 1, all of those teams will be removed from the rankings.
So if I was Ohio State, if I was Ohio State and Clemson happened to lose its first game, I would declare myself national champion.
Yeah. I mean, why not? I want to, so we're not going to read through that whole list because you know what? The preseason rankings just flat out don't matter.
Of course.
If anything, we should be thanking the AP because they've just demonstrated how much the rankings don't matter.
Right.
But furthermore to that, I want you to, Mike, take a look really quick at the team that rounds out the top 25.
Yeah.
The Tennessee Volunteers are starting the season ranked.
Look at that.
It's been a minute, Mike Maharrey.
And if you remove all of the teams that aren't playing, they're ranked pretty high.
We already did the math. So if Tennessee wins their opening game, and assuming they don't get leapfrogged by teams who weren't ranked or didn't play or whatever, right. Tennessee would be 16th.
How about that?
So in case you're wondering at home, the way to make your team great is just eliminate all the teams better than them because they didn't play. And now you're a top 10 team just like that.
I like that.
I do want to say really quick, you'd mentioned South Florida, so I'm going to do my 1 minute Homer Vols talk before we move on. There can't be any Homer Boise State talk because they're not playing. True. By the way, they didn't rank them either. Boise State didn't start, quote unquote, start the season ranked, even though they ranked other teams that aren't playing their season. That actually perturbed me a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you.
Slide it even when they're not playing.
I got to be honest with you, though. I don't think Tennessee would beat Boise State right now. I think Tennessee's getting better, but I still don't think they've quite overcome that level of competition.
Well, you know what I've heard, and this
What?
is kind of how I feel about Tennessee. I think if they get good play at the quarterback position, they'll probably have a pretty good year.
Maybe. Who can even say, though?
I don't know.
So with that said, my really quick Homer UT talk. I would prefer they not started the season ranked. I think that they are definitely one of the teams, and we'll get to this in the preview, whose schedule is notably more difficult top to bottom. Look, if you're playing the SEC, you got a tough schedule.
True.
And their schedule is somewhat tougher with the updated schedules of only playing SEC teams, adding a couple of extra tough West opponents, getting rid of your cupcake out of conference. Now, keep in mind, Tennessee was also playing Oklahoma out of conference, so they didn't schedule totally nobodies like some people do.
Right.
But they did schedule like a very gimme homecoming game, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's going to be a tough schedule. Part of me wishes that they could have started the season unranked and made their way into the rankings by winning, 5, 6, 7 games as opposed to the other way around.
This will be more fun though. They can lose some games and drop out. I'll enjoy that more.
I'm sure you will. We'll see. We'll see where Florida ends the season.
Well, look where they are now.
Exactly. They have further to fall, unless you think they're moving up. In that case.
They're definitely moving up. Ohio State's moving out.
I mean, Florida could just lose their opening game, and then
they could.
There you are. So, speaking of that, it's time to look at the SEC, or excuse me, we're going to start with the ACC. We're only going to be talking about the ACC, Big 12, and SEC today. Those are the Power 3 conferences that will be playing this year. We're going to start with the ACC, and right off the bat, the number one takeaway that I think everyone's talking about, Notre Dame, which is still one of those wonky quote-unquote independents, will be playing an ACC schedule this year. Mm-hmm. Mike, what do you think that means for Notre Dame in the ACC?
I think they're going to lose a lot more games than they would have, if you want to be honest. I mean, if it's true to form, because I think Notre Dame is perennially overranked.
So you know me, I'm a big Notre Dame hater. I absolutely think Notre Dame is. But by the way, if you go back, take another quick look at that AP top 25. So even with the other teams in there, Notre Dame starts the season 10.
10, yeah.
What have they done to warrant a top 10 ranking going into this season? Please, someone tell me. What I mean, did they beat Wake Forest by enough points to get in the top 10? Come on. Anyway, with that said, as much as I am hating on them, I will say I think this is a good idea for them.
Yeah.
I think that they're doing the right thing, and I hope that I don't think that they'll have a good season in terms of wins and losses, but I hope that they have a good enough season in terms of just competitiveness that they think, okay, we got to join a conference. Let's just stop the charade. Let's join a conference. That way no Alan Mosley's out there can constantly say that we're not deserving because we're basically picking and choosing our cupcakes and yada yada yada.
Right.
I think it's a good move. And I don't think the ACC only stands to gain because they have a team who's got a big TV deal playing one of their opponents every week.
Right.
So I think the ACC stands to gain. I think Notre Dame stands to gain. So while I don't think it automatically boosts the profile of either one necessarily, I think it's the right move. And if you're Notre Dame, by the way, I think it's the right move to join the ACC because otherwise what are they going to do? Join the SEC? Come on, they ain't going to do that.
No.
When they lose their first 8 games, they'll be right out of that conference. So speaking of that, you might remember from a couple of weeks ago where we talked about, or a week ago, we were talking about how are they going to do these modified, updated schedules.
Right.
And originally, a lot of people thought, and take, for instance, the SEC, well, just take your next 2 years' West opponents and add them to this year. That way, it's completely transparent. There's no jerry rigging the schedules to help out the biggies and hurt the littlies. But they didn't do that. They kind of ditched that plan at the last minute. And sure enough, there was more than a few complaints from coaches, sporting department heads, all sorts of people who were saying, wait a minute, why is it that Alabama gets to play nobodies and why does Missouri now have to play Alabama and LSU? It doesn't make a lot of sense. The SEC wasn't the only one. So look at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, who has had some lean years the last several years, but Georgia Tech was a perennial bowl team not that long ago.
They were
and
with their with that wishbone thing they ran.
Yeah. So Georgia Tech, they're deep in a rebuild. All right, they got a new coach, Jeff Collins.
Yeah, trying to revamp, go to a more pro style offense. So they're not just changing coaches, changing their entire system.
So Georgia Tech actually already had Notre Dame on their schedule as an out-of-conference opponent, and now because Notre Dame joined, that's an out-of-conference opponent that they'll keep, whereas other people ditched theirs. So, and the AAC, your South Florida American Athletic Conference, they're continuing to play.
Right.
Georgia Tech has UCF as an out-of-conference opponent.
Oh.
So Georgia Tech now, under the new schedule, will be starting the season with Florida State and then play UCF. And then they'll get Louisville, Clemson, and Notre Dame. It's almost a certainty Georgia Tech starts the season 0-5.
Yeah.
So that's pretty yikes. And it's not just them, by the way, and it's not just small market teams. The Miami Hurricanes going into this year's ACC schedule. So they're going to have their annual rivalry with Florida State.
Right.
And they're going to be going on the road to Wake Forest, which was a team that actually was a competitor in the ACC last year, Clemson notwithstanding.
Right.
So they get both Louisville and Clemson on the road. So it's also very likely. It would be a shocker if Miami wins more than 3 or 4 games. It'd be a shocker if Georgia Tech wins more than 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show you that without getting to play, Charlotte or Austin Peay at a conference, things can be a little bit tough for you.
Yeah, it gets dicey. Speaking of UCF, just a quick side note. Did you know Mackenzie Milton's playing again?
What?
Yeah, I heard that the other day. He's been practicing.
I wonder if he's going to start this season.
I don't know.
Or if he's just getting back into pads.
I don't know. But I did hear that he was on the field practicing and doing well.
Wow.
And for folks who don't know, he basically busted his leg in half. It was 2 seasons ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2 seasons ago. Yeah, he's been out of football for a while.
Yeah, I mean, he had basically the same injury as what's his name? The Redskins, Alex Smith.
So to wrap up the ACC, we'll make this really easy. We'll just have two end of the segment questions for Mike Maharrey. We're gonna have like 3 separate lightning rounds for you in this episode.
Ooh.
Number 1, what is the percentage chance that Clemson wins the ACC?
I'm gonna go with I'm gonna give it a 90% chance.
90. So
I'm gonna hedge a little bit.
So you're thinking 1 out of 10 chances that they don't win the ACC. If they don't, why not?
They stumble and have injury problems. Lose a game they shouldn't lose, and then have injury problems late in the year. Some kind of scenario like that. Second
question. A lot of the experts, especially on ESPN, are saying Notre Dame is going to go somewhere between 8-2, 8-3, or 9-2, and be the number 2 team in the quote-unquote revamped ACC. Do you think that Notre Dame is the second best team in the ACC?
Given what we saw last year, yeah, probably, but that's not a really giving credit to Notre Dame. It's more of an indictment of the rest of the ACC.
So what we'll have to watch for is our teams like North Carolina, Louisville.
They looked better at the end of last year.
Florida State, Miami. Will those types of teams have a chance to make a splash, or is it just going to be the winner of Clemson Notre Dame wins the conference?
Right. Florida State is first year under a new head coach, so.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to the Big 12. We've talked about some losers from the new scheduling, so let's talk about a winner. Now, you might remember last season, Texas they lost to LSU, who was the eventual national champion, but it was a good game. It was 45-38. That's a strong showing against a team that went on to blow out everybody pretty much. And they were going to have, because they are playing a home and home, they would have the rematch this year with LSU. But since the conferences are only playing in conference, Texas loses the matchup with LSU. So now their only quote-unquote out-of-conference game is UTEP. So they lose LSU. They're going to play UTEP instead, and then they're going to go on to play teams like Kansas and West Virginia.
Yeah. They avoided playing USF.
Yes.
They had a choice, USF or UTEP, and they decided to stay in state.
Yep.
I know they were scared of the Bulls.
Scared. Yep, they were scared. So I actually tend to think that Texas, while they might not necessarily be the best team in the Big 12, they're going to have a fortuitous schedule. And if the Texas team that was a possession away of beating eventual champion LSU comes back this year with a improved Sam Erlinger at quarterback, Texas could be a team that challenges for the conference.
Yeah.
However, since we love losers on this program, how about the Kansas Jayhawks?
Oh,
the Kansas
they're not good to begin with.
No, I mean they were slightly improved under Les Miles' first season at head coach. If you'll remember, that's where he wound up. Mm-hmm. But to be fair, Les has a long way to go to bring that program back to relevance. I mean, they had several 1 and 2 win type seasons in the last several years. However, they're a schedule loser because they did have a home game against Boston College, which they now don't have. Mm-hmm. And that would have been a winnable game. And they also would have had an FCS opponent in New Hampshire, which you'd like to think that's a winnable game.
Right.
Unfortunately, now their only game that's of that same tier of competition is they open the season against Coastal Carolina. Now, you might think, well, there you go, that's a win. Keep in mind, Coastal Carolina beat Kansas last year, 12-7.
Right.
So outside of that, their schedule is teams along the lines of Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Texas, and TCU. By the way, those are the next 4 most winningest games for them outside of Coastal Carolina.
That's kind of a yikes.
It's a pretty big yikes. So we're going to go to our big predictions. What is the percent chance that Oklahoma wins the Big 12?
Well, they have to replace a quarterback, so that's significant.
Yes, they are replacing quarterback.
And I would say, I don't know. I honestly don't know what they lost after last season. So I'm just going to throw a number out there. We'll say 70%.
I think that's fair. I still think they're the strong odds-on favorite to win the Big 12. Of course, keep in mind, everybody in the NFL wanted to hire Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma, and he decided to stay put.
Right.
I think there's every reason to believe that Oklahoma is going to be the odds-on favorite as long as Lincoln Riley's at the helm, until another program really moves into that kind of elite category.
Right.
With that said, I think if anyone challenges, it'll be Oklahoma State or Texas. But Oklahoma State has had more talented teams than they've had this year and never quite been able to get over the hump.
Right.
And while Texas will have a little bit more fortuitous schedule this year, and Texas has been competitive with Oklahoma in the last few seasons, it's definitely going to come down to those teams. But I think that there's a chance that, I feel like a strong possibility Oklahoma loses a game and still wins the conference. Whereas I think the rest of the conference may lose 2+ games, which just puts them all out of contention in this kind of abbreviated season.
So I've got one for you.
Okay.
Percentage chance that Iowa State pulls off a big upset.
8,000%.
It's like every single year Iowa State beats somebody that you're like, wait, what?
Yes, Iowa State is exactly that kind of spoiler team where, Texas beats Oklahoma, Oklahoma wins out, but they have that one loss. But Texas can't win at all because Texas gets skunked by someone like Iowa State.
Right.
And it just ruins the whole year. I will say this, by the way. All of ESPN's experts are saying that Kansas is going to go 1-9 and West Virginia is going to go 2-8. After that, they think that TCU and Texas Tech are both going to have losing records, with Kansas State being somewhere in the area and Baylor being somewhere in the area of 5-5. All in all, they're saying the Big 12 completely blows except for Oklahoma, Texas, and Oklahoma State.
My wife will not be pleased with that West Virginia team.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. Yeah. With that said, it's time to move on to the conference that Steve Spurrier said they might as well just give it to them because they're going to win it we We talked a little bit about the SEC in the last couple of weeks when their scheduling backroom fiasco happened.
Right.
So we already know about some of the losers and winners of the scheduling. But we're going to talk about some of the dark horse teams. Is Georgia going to be the SEC East favorite?
I think they will be the SEC East favorite. I think the East is going to be a little bit more competitive this year. I think Tennessee, if they get that quarterback play we were talking about, I think that they could be in the mix. I think Florida can be in the mix, and even a Kentucky. They've done a good job up there in Lexington. So I think you could see some upsets, and I think Georgia will be the favorite, but I don't think that they're a shoe-in.
Here's an interesting one. In the West, a lot of people predict that LSU is going to lose a minimum of 2, possibly 3 or more games this year. A lot of people think that because LSU is having to replace their leader at cornerback, who's moved on to be a number 1 pick in the NFL for the Bengals. A lot of people think that LSU will not be reloaded for this season coming off a championship year, whereas other teams, which by the way are also replacing quarterbacks, Alabama, I'm looking at you. Right. They all think that Alabama is just the shoe-in champion. Do you think that that's disrespectful to LSU? Do you think that that's spot on?
I think it's a little bit disrespectful. I think you get these. You kind of get this. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but this kind of mainstream. Like we see this in financial networks. They pick these darlings, and it's hard to move them off of that. It's a lot of times they live in the past a little bit, and I think we see that some with Alabama. We just expect Alabama to be, and for good reason. They recruit well, they've got good coaching, all of these things. But other teams can do that as well, and I think that I like the program at LSU. They're not, they haven't been bad in quite a while. So, I think that might be a little bit disrespectful. I mean, obviously, there's a question mark anytime you're replacing a quarterback, but Alabama has the same question mark. So,
I want to just really quickly on this question revisit the top 25. If you'll notice, in 2019, Alabama's record was 11-2. They had the 2 losses. They lost to LSU, of course, but they also lost to Auburn. And Auburn was a good team, but not a great team. They lost to Auburn as well. Just pointing out that the ESPN experts predict Alabama to have a better season this year, even though they're replacing Tua than they had last year. Whereas LSU, who won the national championship and went undefeated, they expect to lose 3 or 4 more games this year.
Right.
I don't know. Seems I agree with you. It seems like there's a little bit of red tide favoritism there in the sports. Not that Alabama hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt in the Saban era, but Alabama was not quite the world beater last year, and to just assume that they'll be a better team this year in an all SEC schedule seems a little bit of a stretch. I don't know.
Now, I think that, you mentioned Auburn. I think Auburn's a team that could be in the mix as well. I mean, they had flashes of being really good last year with the freshman quarterback. So, I like that program as well. So,
yeah.
The SEC is always competitive. Even some of your lower tier teams can be competitive sometimes.
Yeah. Last one before we get into our predictions. So, my Tennessee Volunteers. This is an interesting season for them. Everyone has heard all offseason long, oh my God, every single recruit's going to Tennessee. That was the talk of what little football news we had for about 2 months was, what are they doing? What is the Pruitt regime doing? Here come the NCAA sanctions, right? Like, why is it I see Tennessee gets X recruit in the news every other day? All throughout, and they're, genuinely challenging Ohio State for the number 1 recruiting class going into next year. But that's next year. For this year, you know how college football works. People expect you to always be building and improving.
Right.
And even though lots of great recruits are coming, albeit they'll only be freshmen, and lots of great recruits are coming next year, that's next year. Mm-hmm. Can Tennessee build upon the win streak they had to finish 2020 going into 2021? Now, again, people will expect that they can. People always they'll say, well, you've had another year to recruit, another year to build. You should be another year better, right? And also, by the way, remember, Tennessee has the second longest winning streak in the nation behind LSU.
I did not know
However,
that.
yeah, they do. However, this year they've got road games at Georgia and Auburn and play Florida and Alabama and Texas A&M.
Mm-hmm.
That's 5 tough games right there to go along with the rest. So will the Volunteers be able to get over the hump in Jeremy Pruitt's third season at the helm?
I'm going to say no.
Imagine my surprise.
That's just because I don't like them.
Well, I have nothing to say to you. Why did I even ask that question? I knew you weren't going to say anything nice.
I'm like, why are we even going down this road?
Whatever. Florida's going to get skunked. It's fine.
No, go Gators.
So to our final predictions, both for the SEC and everyone. Mike, what is the percentage chance Alabama wins the SEC?
I'm going to put it. People will be surprised by this. I'm going to say 60%.
Ooh.
I think there are a lot of good teams in the SEC. And I'm not willing to say, that Alabama is a shoo-in. I think that there could be competition from a number of teams.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. So if a quick browse of the ESPN experts' predictions. By the way, they're not predicting an undefeated SEC team. All the predictions have Alabama and Georgia both at 9-1. Having a stumble somewhere, depending on if they're having conference championship games, maybe one's undefeated, one beats the other.
Right.
Both are predicting Florida at 8-2. I didn't take a close look at Florida's schedule. I'm pretty sure Florida's not playing Alabama. But they're predicting Florida to have 2. They're probably predicting Florida to lose the Florida-Georgia cocktail party.
Right.
And then one other loss. After that, it's the same teams but kind of flip-flopped around. Some people say LSU 8-2 or 7-3. Some people say Auburn 7-3 or 8-2. A lot of buzz for Texas A&M to be in that area of 8-2 or 7-3, which kind of goes to your point that, I mean, they're already predicting Alabama to not be undefeated. But if you have Georgia, Florida, Auburn, LSU, and Texas A&M that are all somewhere between 7-3 and 9-1 caliber teams, none of those are gimmies.
Right.
After that, they rank Tennessee as the next best team at either 6-4 or 5-5, depending on who you read, and it goes down to losing records from there. For a quick aside, for your Kentucky Wildcats, both the experts say Kentucky goes 4-6.
Oh, yikes!
4-6.
Now somebody said that I think I heard on one of the sports stations that Kentucky was just outside of the top 25.
So, it's kind of a weird. We already know this is going to be a weird season, and there's already been a lot of talk that with only 3 of the power conferences playing, and then with a certain number of the mid majors playing, what is this going to mean for bowl games? Mm-hmm. And specifically, what will this mean for bowl eligibility? Will 4-6 be bowl eligible because there'll be so many bowl games needing to fill teams?
Right.
If so, don't get me wrong, nobody wants to be 4-6. No. But if you're 4-6, you're probably bowl eligible in 2021. So I think Kentucky still goes to a bowl game because I think Kentucky is head and shoulders better than the worst teams in the SEC. And if they can beat one middle of the road SEC team, you can go to a bowl game.
Right.
I'm not saying that that's, Alabama's not hoping to beat the worst teams in the SEC and then win one more game. I'm just simply saying that is good enough in this season where you're playing an odd number of games with an odd number of opponents.
Right.
One last really quick thing. One of the experts, apparently Vanderbilt and Arkansas don't play each other this year because one of the experts says that Vanderbilt and Arkansas both finished the season 0-10.
Oh, yikes.
That is a little yikes. But for fairness, the other expert says that they both finished 1-9. So good on them.
Yeah.
Good on them to win a game.
That will not probably be bowl eligible. Notice I say probably.
Yeah. So last full season predictions before we get our final sprint to close out this week's show. So we talked about Alabama and a tough road in the SEC. We talked about Oklahoma, maybe Texas. We talked about Clemson and everyone else, Notre Dame included. If they have a 4-team college football playoff this year, which it seems like this season is going to be played out just like any other season, just with weird schedules and conferences. Who are the 4 teams that make the college football playoff?
Well, I'll be conventional.
Okay.
I'll go with what your experts would probably say are the favorites. I'll say Oklahoma,
Okay.
Clemson, Alabama.
Okay.
And then another team from the SEC will say Georgia.
Okay, so you're saying 2 SEC teams this year. It's a done deal. 2 SEC.
I don't see, unless you have a situation where you could maybe have a Texas sneak in there.
Yeah. I think it might come down to the results over the last week or two of the season and whether pollsters believe in there's kind of that weird. This is the problem with having pollsters do rankings in college football and shady deals being made to determine who's in the playoffs. Is if 2 teams finish the season 9-1 and one of them lost their game in week 2 and the other one lost their game in week 10, you know that the team who just lost their game is probably out. Right. But how are those teams any different? I mean, and that's something that's played college football, by the way, for decades.
Sure.
This isn't a recent phenomenon. So I think that the SEC, I'm not 100% sure how the conference championships and scheduling is going to work out.
Right.
But there's certainly a possibility that an undefeated or close to it Alabama plays an undefeated or close to it Georgia. And one of those teams has to lose at the end of the season. And if they just lost, they might not get the nod.
Well, yeah, that's true.
And it's funny how you can automatically eliminate 40% of the teams from contention and still be pissed off as to who gets in and who doesn't. Right. I think that there's a strong chance that happens. I think it goes without saying that the winners of each major conference are going to get enough. I mean, unless you have something like a Big 12 where the team that wins the Big 12 has like 4 losses because it's just a bloodbath.
Right.
Barring that scenario, I think it's obvious that the winners of the Big 3 get in.
Right.
And there's going to be one other. And until proven otherwise, it's not going to be a mid-major. I'm not saying that because I want it that way. I'm saying it because they want it that way.
Right.
Some people have already said, well, what if UCF goes undefeated again in this season of all seasons? And my answer is they'll finish the season 5th. How can you even think it'll be any different?
They're not going to finish undefeated. I hate them worse than Tennessee.
I know you do. So if Tennessee plays UCF, who are you rooting for?
Oh, I'll put on the orange.
Now I hope Tennessee plays Central Florida in a bowl game or something, just for that reason.
I will do it. You can mark it down here. If Tennessee plays UCF, I will wear Tennessee orange.
All right. With that said, I'll give my prediction. So I'm going to stay pretty conventional too. It's going to be Clemson. I'm actually going to say, you know what? I'm going to say Texas beats Oklahoma and gets the nod. Okay. I'm going to say Texas. I'm going to say Clemson. I'm going to say Georgia. Mm-hmm. Not Alabama.
Ooh.
And then the 4th team will be Alabama. But they'll be the 2nd team in. I think that they're the team that if they're the team on the outside looking in, they'll get the nod, whereas maybe other teams in the exact same situation wouldn't get the benefit of the doubt.
I think that's fair.
I think that might be better if you're an SEC fan. I think if it's someone like Georgia on the outside looking in, they might not get that spot.
That could be.
Just saying.
Especially, let's say you get the upset and Florida beats Georgia in the cocktail party and ends up winning the East. I think Florida would definitely be outside looking in that, second out scenario.
Yeah. And that goes exactly. I don't have Florida's schedule up in front. Are they still playing Georgia at the end of the year?
I'm not sure when. I haven't looked at the schedule either, to be honest.
So that's just another one of those things right there. That if you knew that you were going to play Alabama in the championship game and you needed an upset over Georgia to get in the championship game, or any combination of those scenarios, when do you want to play the games? If you play them too early and lose one, then you might still be okay. If you play them at the end and lose one, you're automatically out. It's just the ridiculousness of college football.
So Florida, Georgia this year is November 7th.
Okay. How many games do they have after that?
They have after that they have Arkansas and Vanderbilt and Kentucky and Tennessee. So it's kind of in the middle.
They played Tennessee at the end?
Wait a minute. Yeah.
That's so weird.
Is this 2020? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I had heard that. The Tennessee-Florida game had basically was moved to the end of the season. Which, by the way, I don't understand if you're having to modify the schedule, but they already play each other. Why are they playing each other at the end?
Yeah, it's December 5th. And Kentucky is usually an early opponent for Florida as well, which is going to be November 28th.
So is that their last game of the season, is Tennessee?
Tennessee is the last game, yes.
Sucks that they have to go out on an L.
So they've got Mississippi is their opener. Then they've got South Carolina, A&M, LSU, Missouri, Georgia, Arkansas, Vandy, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So they don't have they have a relatively friendly schedule.
They have, for an SEC team, they have a ridiculously friendly schedule.
They're not having to play all those beasts of the West. So.
Yeah. See, don't you wish you were as cool as Tennessee and play Alabama every year as a rivalry game?
Nah. Rivalry.
Hey!
It's a rivalry for Tennessee, not for Alabama.
Well, I remember lots of Alabama fans singing a different tune basically from like 94 through 2001. Well, yeah.
Those were the years that Tennessee always lost to Florida.
Always, except for when they were winning titles. Yeah. Tennessee's going to beat Florida this year. I hope you know that, right?
Yeah. Maybe we'll live cast that game. That would be fun.
We are. Are we still going to live cast the first NFL game?
I don't know. I'm open to it.
I think we should. We talked about that. We have to make the official announcement maybe next week whether or not we're going to do it, because we did the NCAA preview this week, but actually college football starts after pro football. The first pro football game. Well, I mean, not technically. Some wonky weird college teams will be playing first, but the first pro game is actually next Thursday.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah, so how about that? I think it's time to move on to something more hockey related. So take it away.
Well, I'll shoot a quick puck to the head. Have you heard about Mike Milbury? You know, NBC's not going to have anybody left doing the hockey color analysis.
They're going to have to hire you.
They're going to have to hire us because they keep firing people because people keep saying things. Mm-hmm. And this time it was Mike Milbury. Now, this puck to the head, though, is not going to Mike Milbury because, well, I'll just read to you what was said. Brian Boucher kind of was leading on. They were talking about life in the bubble. Mm-hmm. And Boucher said, if you think about it, it's a terrific environment with regard to if you enjoy playing, if you enjoy being with your teammates for long periods of time, it's a perfect place. Mm-hmm. And Milbury responds, not even any women here to disrupt your concentration. Mm-hmm. Now, we all understand, those of us that are guys, we understand what Mike Milbury was saying, right?
Yes.
I mean, so this apparently is extremely offensive to women. So offensive, in fact, that they suspended him, and now he is no longer in the employ of NBC. Now, I'll tell you this, Mike Milbury can't stand him. Plenty of good reasons that they should have fired him a long time ago, but this wasn't it. This is absurd. This is one of those things, people acting shocked that hockey players might actually chase women.
The thing that makes us detest this sort of thing, it's not that I'm shocked that it happened, but I'm surprised how little of a thing it can be to trigger people.
Yeah. I kind of got the whole Roenick thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. I can understand why that was perceived as offensive. I still don't think it was firing offensive, but that's just me because I don't get offended. But this is not offensive in the least. All he was saying is that in this bubble, you're not going out to the bars after the game and picking up a chick.
Yeah.
And I've been around a lot of hockey players. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to tell you right now, for those of you who don't know, hockey players like to go to bars, drink beer, and pick up chicks. I'm just saying.
What percentage of coaches, assistants, and star players would be out of a job tomorrow if there was a live mic in every locker room?
100.
100%. You think so? 100%.
Even the nicest guys, like you'll be sitting in a locker room and the guy that you would never expect, something will drop out of his mouth at some point in the season.
Yeah.
Oh, it always happens. It's just how it is. Boys will be boys, as Donald Trump said.
That's our second dog whistle of this week's episode. Speaking of dog whistles, it's time for the LP Team of the Week.
Woo!
The LP Team of the Week is the Orlando Magic. By the way, the Magic kind of shocked the NBA with their opening Game 1 win over the Milwaukee Bucks. A lot of people's favorite for this year's title. They won the game 122 to 110. By the way, that's the greatest picture ever.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Orlando, they haven't been able to find that magic since. They lost games 2, 3, and 4 by 15, 14, and 15 points apiece. Game 5's tomorrow night. I think the Magic are probably out of this series. It's not often that a series gets won 4-1 with the one game being in Game 1.
Right.
This will probably be an instance of that. So, Orlando Magic, you're our LP team of the week.
I like the way you worked Magic into your pros there. That was good.
I mean, when you've been doing 72 episodes of SportsBall, you become an expert.
That's true.
But it's time for us to get our solemn faces
Yes.
on. It's time for In Memoriam, where we remember a player, a team, a coach, whoever. His sporting life was cut tragically short, probably due to a live mic in the locker room. Mike, who are you remembering this week?
Well, sometimes I do In Memoriams and they're a little bit gleeful, but I actually feel bad for this dude. Today, we're remembering John Franklin III. Now, folks who are fans of the ESPN, or actually not ESPN, Netflix show Last Chance U, will remember John Franklin III from, I believe it was episode 1. And this guy actually, he was highly recruited, came out of South Florida. He was one of those guys, super good athlete, basically got by on his athleticism, got a scholarship to Florida State, was on that first national championship that Jameis Winston won. And then, realizing that he wasn't really going to have an opportunity to start, he decided to go the JUCO route, and he went to East Mississippi Community College, which is where they were doing the Last Chance U, and he kind of became a fan favorite, even though actually he ended up, here's this stud coming out of Florida State, and he actually got beat out at the junior college level. And his big problem is that he was so athletic, he never really learned how to play quarterback. He had every athletic tool, but he had never really been coached to really learn the position. So, but he was athletic enough, went in on the last game of that Last Chance U season, scored 5 touchdowns in the first half, ended up getting signed by Auburn. He was at Auburn for 1 year, did some backup quarterback duties, and then ended up going to Florida Atlantic. And interestingly, his agent talked him into, when they did their pro day, he said, work out for every position that you can. So this guy worked out as quarterback, as a receiver, as a defensive back, as a kick returner, and as a punt returner. Ended up getting signed by the Chicago Bears as a defensive back. Never played defensive back before. So it shows you what a good athlete he was. Ended up, I think he made the practice squad, ended up signing with the Buccaneers last year on the practice squad, kind of caught Arians' eye, and he was on track this year to actually make the team. They were kind of looking at him as a third emergency quarterback option, and then also a wide receiver and possibly a kick returner. Well, John Franklin III blew out his knee, season ending, and so kind of a Cinderella story. The pumpkin came early, so I feel bad for him because he's kind of he's one of those kind of just likable guys and just kind of going against all odds and trying to scrap his way up, and it's kind of sad to see it end like that. But that's that's sports for you.
Yeah. Speaking of that, let me restart the music because that was the longest in memoriam we've ever had. I'm remembering Brett Brown, former head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. You might remember us speaking just a week ago. Are the 76ers in trouble? Answer, yes.
Yes.
they were in trouble, Mike. So in trouble, in fact, that they've already been bounced from the playoffs. I do have a soft spot in my heart for Brown. Brown was one of these guys that was brought in to rebuild a program that was going out of its way to trade away its talent and purposely lose to get ready for the future. So when you say that he was 221 and 344 over his 6-7 seasons with the 76ers, understand that a lot of those losses were during a time when their management was telling him, go lose this game.
Right.
And it's also not his fault, by the way, that Ben Simmons, one of their star players, really hasn't developed a reliable jump shot. And then going into this year's postseason, they had some injury issues. Embiid they had a good roster, but things were never really quite able to come together all at the same time, all in the same season, all in the same postseason. A lot of that is unfortunate. A lot of that's just part of the business. But a lot of that also was not under his complete control.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be strange to say that he gets shown to the door and not some of the other members of upper management. But as of this recording, they're all safe and he's.
Wow.
So we're remembering Brett Brown. You have a final thought?
I do. Here's a big yikes if you're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, and I am. Mm-hmm. If you've watched the Tampa Bay Lightning, you know that their bread and butter is their power play. Score a lot of goals on the power play. Kind of was a problem for him last year in the playoffs because you don't get as many power plays in the playoffs as you do during the regular season. But still, when you get them, you need to put the puck in the net. Sure. So far in the playoffs, through 6 games, you know how many power play goals the Lightning has?
How many?
Nada. They're like 0 for 12 or something ridiculous like that. Yeah.
It just goes to show you how deep into the playoffs you can go without any power play goals, right?
Well, there you go. If they don't figure it out before this Boston series is over, they'll be leaving the bubble and heading back to Tampa to the golf course.
I'll tell you what my final thought is. We talked about this just briefly earlier, that isn't there some weird random lower division games happening in the near future?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready for football this Saturday, Mike Maharrey?
I am.
The Central Arkansas Bears are hosting the Austin Peay Governors. You know Austin Peay up there in Clarksville, so not too far away from Lexington, your old hometown.
Yeah, my mom went to Austin Peay.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, her very own Governors are traveling to take on the Central Arkansas Bears in what will surely be a game with national title implications on the line. No, but not really. But
you know what one of their cheers is, Austin Peay?
What's that?
Go P, go P.
Of course.
It really is.
However, I will say this. We're having a little bit of a laugh because that of all games happens to be the first game, and it's happening kind of so early before the major teams take the field. However, I will say this. With it being our first legit on-field regular season game of this horrible COVID offseason, I bet that'll be the most watched Central Arkansas Austin Peay game ever.
Ever. I may tune in.
I'm absolutely planning on tuning in.
Yeah.
Go P.
Go P.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of SportsBall, and we will see you next week. Love me.
You've been listening to SportsBall with Mike Maharrey and Alan Mosley. You can follow us on Facebook and leave comments, suggestions. Just go to @SportsBall Podcast. That's @SportsBall Podcast on Facebook. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.